Hello and welcome to the very first episode of the Nerdvana Inkspector. We're so excited to have you with us today. We're your hosts, Danny.
And Marla.
And together we defeat the greatest crime of all.
Failed opportunities.
To tell powerful stories. And let me tell you, there's many. But that's exactly why we're here. To tell powerful stories. And let me tell you, there's many. But that's exactly why we're here. To discuss exactly why these stories need to be told. Am I right?
You're completely right.
Oh, man. So let's get started. I'm so excited for the topic that we're about to discuss today.
So the topic that we're going to be discussing today, as a matter of fact, is one of tremendous interest and amongst the community. You feel me?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think I know exactly what you mean. So for those of you who are stepping with us today, since we're rookies, but also since this is a very new topic, so just so you know, spoiler alert.
We may be rookies in the field, but we're not rookies when it comes to the path of knowledge.
So be wary about the points that we're going to make today about a specific movie that recently came out.
Viewer and listener discretion is advised.
Yeah, definitely. And especially spoilers. And I'm about to reiterate that. Spoilers. So those who have not seen Deadpool and Wolverine, I'm warning you right now.
It's an ST.
Wolverine, I'm warning you right now.
It's an STW. A spoiler, trigger warning.
Okay, so now that we have that out of the way, oh man, I'm so excited to talk about it. So first thoughts about the movie.
Brilliant, incredible, masterful, and most importantly, very coherently and concretely.
I think that it's one of the best movies that Marvel has come out with in a while. I mean, already Disney kind of has been a letdown lately, and Marvel also. And it's a shame, right? Because there's so many good stories that need to be told, just like we talk about in our intro. And it just makes you wonder exactly what matters to them, right?
Because there are so many wonderful properties that have been explored time and time again. Other properties or intellectual properties that are yet to be explored, or others that unfortunately have not fallen in the right hands, or with the people who have the best interests of the characters, of the plots that have been told, fallen in the right hands, or with the people who have the best interests of the characters, of the plots that have been told, and of the stories at heart.
Right.
However, throughout the course of my viewing experience of Deadpool and Wolverine, it wasn't just a viewing experience. It was more than just a viewing experience, might I add, of Marvel entries. It was also one of the most profoundly groundbreaking and well-balanced films that I had ever seen.
I think I can agree with you. I mean, definitely it took me a lot by surprise since, I mean, Deadpool is Deadpool, right? He's very raunchy and I guess very much for a mature audiences, but it didn't focus a lot on that, but it focused on a lot of the heart. So, I mean, overall, it's a really good movie to watch if you understand a little bit about the characters, you have a deep love for the characters, you grew up with the characters. I mean, it's a love letter to the fans, because it's been a while since we actually see Touch the Heart.
Oh, definitely. I mean, first and foremost, Deadpool and Wolverine as an experience alone, it was evocative of my own experiences growing up in the comic book community, how I felt, or the things that I would have envisioned had I adapted it myself. And very interestingly enough, with Sean Levy, the director at the helm,
right,
it not only had a tremendous approach to taking advantage of the rating that it had, but not in an overly hyper-politicized way.
I agree. I mean, definitely, when I watched Deadpool, I was like, okay, how are they going to play off, raunchiness with heart, with awesome action? And it honestly really surpassed my expectations, because as soon as I saw the intro, spoiler alert, that's literally why NSYNC was mentioned, and it was 6 years in the making just to make that punchline with Celine Dion in that last movie, I guess. But it really made me realize, it just hyped up the movie so much. Like, the intro, it takes you by surprise, Already we know that he found out a very creative way to use Wolverine's skull as a weapon. I never thought that someone would actually do that.
It actually could be possible because, first and foremost, there was a battle in the comics between Wolverine and Mephisto. And when Wolverine goes to the underworld, his body is basically disintegrated up until the adamantium skull is in full display, or the adamantium cranial and skeletal structure is on full display.
But is he still alive though when that happens? I mean, he
was still alive. He was still alive. It was like being skinned alive for him. But it's something that I found very interesting throughout the production process of this film, and reading just a little bit more about what could have been the production process of this film, and reading just a little bit more about what could have been of this film had factors such as the Writers Guild of America strike had not come at a more opportune moment.
Right.
Was that this film was originally going to be centered around Christmas.
Are you kidding me? Like a Grinch Christmas type of thing?
Not necessarily stealing it, but saving Christmas. It doesn't sound like a transformative plot.
It doesn't sound good, honestly. I mean, Deadpool, we love the fact that he's a very neutral character.
And he would have caused mayhem.
Yes, he would have caused mayhem, and yes, he would have saved around there, I guess. But Christmas?
Yeah, which is why I think that
they could have pulled it off, I guess, as like
a miniseries based on the X-Force team as they had originally been planning, because in between the second film and the third film, there was supposed to be a midquel, and the midquel was supposed to be centralized or based on his adventures, or more so misadventures, with Yukio, Negasonic Teenage Warhead, Colossus.
Yeah, the team basically.
As well as Domino and other characters. However, I think that something that I found to be very interesting was that the story came about not only because of Ryan Reynolds' own intervention, but it was because Logan himself, Mr. Hugh Jackman, approached Ryan Reynolds, and he had wanted to have the chance to work with Deadpool or have some level of exposure to the character. According to the accounts that I've read online, he went to his house, he approached him, and he said, hey, it would be great if Logan and Wade had some kind of adventure, and it was supposed to be initially a buddy comedy. And it does have elements of a buddy comedy, but it's not necessarily a buddy comedy. It's transformative. It's solipsistic and existential, because there are so many existential questions that are being posed in the film. What is my purpose? Is the question of free will possible? Have all of these things that I have personally been experiencing preordained or predestined for me? And is there a possibility for me to change my own future?
If that is Jackman himself would have come to my home begging me to make a Wolverine movie, I would be like, dope. When? You say jump in, I'll say how high, right? It's just so amazing. But I understand the doubt, right? Because, already with the death of Logan, it should be like a one and done deal. I mean, already the majority of the mutants died. Professor X died, right? Magneto was doing God knows what. And then Logan, he literally dies out of exhaustion. And you think that Wolverine, being this very powerful mutant, like he would survive millions and millions of years. But I guess it's in the timeline of when they are actually starting to hunt down the mutants, where it still wouldn't make sense to me. And I understand like the hesitancy of the fans, because we're like, I don't know, because Logan technically died, and technically, the helm is supposed to be passed down to X-20.
Because something that Ryan Reynolds always had strove to do throughout the course of production was that he wanted to bring on James Mangold, who was the original director and writer for Logan.
Right.
He wanted to court him and bring him to this project so that way they would be able to find an easy story to the initial impact of the original ending of Logan.
That is a very difficult ask.
It is.
Because, seeing your favorite character, we grieved him. We saw him die. The Avengers, but...
He was our friend for 17 years.
We grew up with this guy. He dies in this chick's arms, and then she has the same power, and from what... He dies in this chick's arms, and then she has the same power, and from what we understand from the comics, that she becomes the next Wolverine.
And in many ways, I can understand the comparisons between her and Connell or Superboy, because to a certain extent, of course, she's a genetic clone of Logan, of Wolverine, but at the same time, she's very different. The actress who portrayed Laura Kinney was able to show that side of tremendous tenacity and strength, but also vulnerability. That it's something that you definitely see, for instance, in films such as X-Men Origins Wolverine. Even though it wasn't well received, or even though it wasn't well regarded, it was a film that definitely showed that Logan had a very traumatic past. It was a film that definitely showed that Logan had a very traumatic past, and that he had been trying to contend with so many different things. Because imagine having gone through such a traumatic life,
right,
and having to mitigate symptoms of PTSD, of depression and anxiety, but for basically more than 200 years in his case. I think one of the things that makes
Deadpool and Wolverine so interesting is that for the entirety of like the movies, I mean, of course we're seeing like the whole X-Men, but it's mostly centered around Wolverine and his story. And we notice basically immortal. He can't die. And it poses a question of, okay, eternity.
Exactly.
And death is what gives life meaning. And without that, it could be difficult for people like Wolverine or Deadpool to find some meaning. And I just love the fact that even if it was like a bromance movie and they center around that and like the marketing and stuff, it's a lot of times, you know, the marketing also could have added on the fact of like Deadpool and Wolverine both have, you know, the same healing properties, the same immortality thing. But it's also interesting that they both have the same concern of like, oh man, so I'm immortal. I'm basically a loser in the MCU. And what value do I pose? Right? Am I worthy of saving my family or my people? And it just really makes you realize that Deadpool is like this one character that is not as well known, I guess, or popular as Wolverine.
Although originally there were plans to create a Deadpool film adaptation.
Right.
And of course, Rob, he had certain reservations because he didn't know necessarily if he had found the right person for the project, but after Ryan Reynolds became acquainted with the character and he had just fallen in love with the comic books during his run as Hal Jordan for DC in Green Lantern, he had done so many different comic book related projects. The Rest in Peace department. He was one of the characters in the Rest in Peace department.
Right.
He was Hannibal King in Blade Trinity, which also adds a weight to.
Oh wow, that's crazy.
Yes, which also adds a weight to his relationship with Wesley Snipes on screen.
Spoiler, Wesley Snipes appears.
Which is incredible. And he had, like, for example, him and Jennifer Garner. Jennifer Garner portrayed his mom in The Atom Project.
And that is so cool, like, how interesting, like, it all connects. And she just came back all awesome as Elektra.
But something that I really liked about her characterization as Elektra was the fact that her suit was comprised of daredevils of different parts of Daredevil. Suit was comprised of daredevils of different parts of Daredevil's suit.
Oh man, really? That is so cool. I guess it also ties back to the fact, like, I mean, these characters, even unfortunately so, they've become, in a sense, forgotten in the MCU, especially. Not necessarily in the comics. In the comics, they're very important.
But in the legacy of the MCU...
not necessarily in the comics. In the comics, they're very important.
But in the legacy of the MCU, there can be a tendency to make a certain misattribution, like, for example, oh, the MCU exists because of Tony Stark. And that, in part, to a certain extent, is true, but at the same time,
no,
it doesn't fully encapsulate the people that truly brought to light what we know to be the MCU today, which is one of the most lucrative.
I mean, Blade is the father of MCU.
Blade is the father, the representative, and he practically pioneered the genre.
He walked so that Tony could run.
Exactly, he walked so that Tony could run, and in many ways, Elektra walked so that Natasha could run. Because
I agree. I mean, powerful women in the MCU is very hard to come by. I mean, we're gonna talk about the failure in tone and message of Black Widow in another video.
Captain Marvel could also...
Yeah, it also warrants another episode, of course. And She-Hulk, don't even get me started on She-Hulk. But it then comes down to, like, the movie is about purpose. Like, what purpose do you pose for yourself? What purpose do you have in your universe? I mean, these are big questions that you can have. And it's important for you to discover for yourself. And it hits home that, these characters are basically have lived hundreds and hundreds of years. And even though, like, you think like them living hundreds and hundreds of years that they already have their life figured out, or they already know who they are, what they do, what's their purpose in this world, in this universe. It's the pivotal message of humanity in itself, even though like, these are mutants, but like these are like human characteristics that we can always start again, no matter how old or where we are, where we come from, what our past is.
And there are also a lot of parallels, for example, I think to the Daniels' films, like for example, the martial artistry that was on display, but most importantly plot-wise, I saw a lot of parallels to Everything Everywhere All at Once. You see the character of Evelyn, the character in scheme of things, the worst iteration of the many different compounding iterations of herself.
Yeah, she's practically the villain, and she's the villain in other story, but she just lost that purpose. And I think I definitely see where you're coming from. That in a lot of ways it parallels Wade. It parallels Deadpool because, he traveled from different universe to different, he traveled from different universe to different universe.
But it also parallels Logan,
or
at least this iteration of Logan, because by the Time Variance Authority's standards, he's considered to be the worst in his universe, or the worst ever in the multiverse.
The worst version ever of Wolverine.
But it flips the everything everywhere all at once paradox on its head, and very interestingly so.
Oh, tell me about that.
Because of the fact that in this case, this Wolverine, it's not like he necessarily failed by way of existing, as Evelyn had been told. It was more so due to the fact that it was his passivity in the moment in which his X-Men needed him the most. And
man. It just also, I think that is very interesting. I mean, yes, Evelyn in Everything Everywhere All at Once. Oh man, that's a tongue twister. She was the villain in the making, but she was created for the purpose of putting the universe in a spin. But I mean, we even saw that in the movie that Wolverine technically is an anchor.
Is an anchor being.
And if an anchor dies, the whole universe dies. And it just makes me realize like how much Logan is relatable. Like the story of the X-Men, even though, they're mutants, they have special powers.
It's appealed to people for over 6 generations.
Mutants, they have special powers.
It's appealed to people for over 6 generations, and mainly because there's a level of diversity and representation that had been represented at the time, or that had been depicted at the time in comic books, through allegory and through mythology and through the brilliance of so many different artists, such as, and there are so many different parallels to real-life politics, to real-life racial relations that many people needed to see represented, but they were so wise.
It's a difficult topic. I mean, these are all difficult topics that a lot of times people don't want to address. And unfortunately, lately, it's been like everyone is just having a genuine, peaceful,
analytical
conversation with them. It's just offensive to them. But it's like, no, we need to have the tough conversations in order to know where people stand.
And in order for us to grow.
And it just that ties back to the X-Men, and especially Deadpool, because it just surprises me to them. But it's like, no, we need to have the tough conversations in order to know where people stand.
And in order for us to grow.
And it just that ties back to the X-Men, and especially Deadpool, because it just surprises me, like, he's a merc with a mouth, he's crazy, he's very hilarious, but it just surprised me how much he was, what he was. And literally, I even told you this when we watched the movie. I was like, yo, Wade with such a deep connection, with a deep heart.
Because he's a multifaceted, I think that's something that these characters have ultimately forced me to confront and have forced the audience to confront, is the fact that sometimes we can have preconceived notions about a character but ultimately at their core, they're very flawed individuals who still have the opportunity to redeem themselves, if not to make amends with the people that they've wronged and find a way to restitute. Because in Wade's case, his main motivation before all of this, was just finding a cure for his cancer, which is something that is very relatable. Like, what wouldn't you do to heal or to find a cure for a terminal illness when you know that you're living on borrowed time? What would you do? What lengths would you go to in order to stay with the people that you love? And then that motivation ended up transmuting, and him and Vanessa are both seen as outcasts. In Wade's case, it's because of the moral decisions that he's made. But in Vanessa's case, it's because she's a societal outcast due to the nature of her profession.
Right.
A lot of people see them as people who aren't necessarily worthy of being considered compatible, or being considered. Even Wolverine at some point, even Logan himself questioned it in the scene in which they were in the car, and he said, you couldn't even make your relationship work with this person. We'll be continuing the segment after a short commercial break.
Yeah, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
This story books have always been our secret weapon, our beacon of hope. But watch out, because corporate giants and CEOs are scheming to turn our beloved heroes into mere money-making pawns. But the question still remains, who will rise up to the challenge? And who will dare to speak out?
Where we come in!
Join us at the Nerdvana Inkspector with your hosts Danny and Marla, who are the wisecracking detectives on a mission to rescue the heart of our beloved stories. Are you ready to grab your capes and join us in this epic crusade? Let's unite, reignite the magic, and rescue our beloved characters from the clutches crusade. Let's unite, reignite the magic, and rescue our beloved characters from the clutches of corporate greed. Same bat time, same bat channel. See you soon, heroes.
I'm even surprised of how, the villain, Charles Xavier's sister, who's the villain,
Cassandra Nova.
The way that she is so deliciously evil. I loved the way the actress portrayed her, but I loved especially how she posed the threat, not just of the universe, but like how she posed a threat to Logan and it really tested them. That's what makes a good villain or a good obstacle. And I think it kind of ties back to what the TVA said, in the end, where Deadpool asks, my universe is saved, but what about Logan? Is there any way to bring the X-Men back? And then they say no, because it made him who he is. And it just ties back to the importance of obstacles. And it's not to say like, oh, we should be grateful and we should roll down and just let it happen. But it's just like an X-Men, just like a superhero, like go through those obstacles knowing that it's not gonna last forever. And we
can rise up.
So I think that it's just a beautiful message to talk about. And also I think the pivotal message is like, just because you might be going through this and you might be feeling like you're failing your purpose in life, or that you don't have everything figured out, don't worry. Most people don't.
These heroes don't even, for example, in my case, I think that this was truly the first film. I've very deeply resonated with Logan, but this was the first film in which I was able to resonate with Wade. And I think that it was mainly because of the fact that it showed how he even though he did many morally questionable things in his life, he wasn't doing them necessarily out of a place of malice. It was something that he was doing because it was the only thing that he knew. And he wanted to have a different life. He wanted to grow past that point of what he saw as a point of no return and be able to provide a better life for him and for his friends. And that was his main motivation, and it led him to ultimately lose sight of himself in the process. Not to say that change is bad, but striving for change for the wrong reasons is what can ultimately lead to cognitive dissonance, and you, in a sense, feeling like you're fulfilling someone else's purpose. And I think that when Logan and Wade find each other in the film, they're both people who have lost everything. And most especially in Logan's case, he lost his X-Men, and they've both committed or done things that had consequences. But it was ultimately in their mutual realization that none of them had 100%. That was, I think, one of the greatest moments that was consoling for the audience too. Like, these individuals that we admire through the stories and through the pages of comics, right, they didn't know what they were doing, and they were figuring it out alongside us. And I think that's what made Cassandra Nova such a chilling villain and such a chilling antagonist, dare I say more antagonist than villain, was the fact that she knew how to exploit that level of empathy and also that level of shame that both of the characters were feeling in that moment in their lives so well and so poignantly, because she herself was considered a mistake and a failure.
I don't know what the phrase is exactly, but a scumbag knows a scumbag, or a person who's been exactly where you are knows you better, because it knows how to push your buttons, knows what it means to push you, to torture you, to hurt you. And I think that it just made me realize I was insulting him. Wade was doing his shenanigans, and they were fighting. At first they were fighting against each other, and in the end they fought with each other. And it just makes me realize how beautiful that is, that they weren't fighting each other. They were fighting themselves, their own selves, because it was like staring into the mirror, fighting themselves, their own selves, because it was like staring into the mirror that they both had regrets. They both needed each other to escape. They both hated their lives. They both couldn't realize their purpose. And hurt people hurt others. So obviously, they're both going to hurt others because of what they've been through, and that they can't deal with it yet. In the end, thankfully, you know, Gambit as Channing Tatum and Elektra and X-23. I mean, it's a shame for Johnny Storm, though.
Yeah, it's a shame for Johnny Storm. Unfortunately, we'll never truly know what allegedly said about Cassandra Nova.
We're not gonna. I mean, we'll just leave it as a mystery. But the point is, you're not truly alone. That there's other people, just like you said beautifully, that there's other people going through the same stuff that you're going through, even if you don't realize it. It just takes a lot of humility to realize it, that we can help each other, we can make each other better. And I think that's a message that nowadays it's so unique, it's so important, because nowadays people are focusing on the wrong things of, do I have more Instagram likes, how much money I need to make a business, I don't know, how people are offended. I don't know how people are offending me because they don't accept me because they're not doing what I am telling them to. Or, I mean, it's just so confusing that it just creates more confusion, more fear, more hate. And hate is the last thing that we as humans in this time bring ourselves up. We need to lift ourselves up together. And yes, I mean, besides the fact that there's a lot of puns and a lot of, I guess, innuendos and shenanigans and gratuitous violence, not to say the least, it just comes back to a message of heart that you are never truly alone. You have a purpose. You don't know what it is. You'll figure it out along the way, but it's something that you have to figure it out for yourself. But just because you have to figure it out on yourself, it doesn't mean you can't have help, right? And I think that's really what's all about.
It's a very valuable lesson that we
It's a very valuable
lesson that we can take away from this, that you are able to find a reflection of yourself. And I think that what was most interesting about this film was the fact that we had characters who are inhuman physiologically, but not inhuman internally or emotionally, because just like Wade and just like Logan, or that iteration of Logan, there are so many other people in the world who are questioning their purpose, who are struggling to find different ways to understand their existence and why they're here, what they live for. And in Logan's case, it was a question of how can I find a specific way to make my eternity meaningful.
I agree.
But in Wade's case, it was more so of like a thought process of, I'm living off of borrowed time, or I know what it's like to not have time, or to basically not have any time left in the world due to a terminal illness. And Logan basically sees Wade as a reflection of what he wishes that he could have. That Wade, for example, is very impulsive, that he lives in the moment, that he's very present with his family, with his friends, a single moment of his life, because he knows what it's like to not have time, and he knows what it's like. Whereas Logan could potentially be a reflection of what Wade wanted the most at some point in his life, to just have time with his loved ones. And he learned time and time again in the previous films, especially when he time travels to save Vanessa from her impending death, that he wanted, all he could ever want was time. And it's not only related to his illness, but it's also related in a sense to his mutation, because his mutation is in a sense more immediate or more spontaneous than Logan's in many ways. So I think it's very interesting that Wade is basically a man who values what little time he has, and Logan initially could have resented that. And what Wade could have potentially initially resented in Logan was that he was a man that had nothing else but time.
Oh, man. Well, I think that's basically all besides the fact of the fights and the references.
The beautiful stunt choreography, and dare I say, if you're Channing Tatum's dialect coach, thank you.
Thank Marvel for bringing Gambit, accurate comic book Gambit.
No, not just comic book accurate, Chambit, if you will, but a version of Gambit that reflects a lot of the human psyche in so many different ways. And I love seeing the small details in their costume design.
Yeah,
you can see that
there's a lot of heart. I mean, again, it's trying to show the fans that have been there since the beginning.
And these characters...
Fans that have been there since the beginning.
And these characters have known us. These characters have grown up with us. And in my case, I was extremely happy to see Eric Brooks / Blade on the screen after 26 years. It was a real privilege.
Yeah. So I think the lesson that we can take away is spend our time wisely. Let's spend time with our loved ones. Let's spend more time on loving than hating. And just really try to observe obstacles as means to growth and not as obstacles or stuff that's going to stop us from achieving it. So listeners, our Paneloids, I think our final question that we would like to leave with you guys at home is, how do you spend your time? How will you plan on spending your time wisely?
Do you reflect on the fleetingness of life, or would you like to have more time? Or do you think that you can just live in between like Quicksilver?
Honestly, yeah. I'm not sure. I think I'd have to think about it. But anyways, we'll leave those thoughts with you guys until the next episode, where we will be discussing someone very interesting, and we'll be discussing a bit more details on those characters, what we think about them, and yeah. Thank you so
much for tuning in and listening to every one of our insights, and thank you for Chanbit, and thank you for Cavalrine.
Oh yeah, Cavalrine. Spoiler. So yeah, anyways, guys, we thank you so much for being in our first episode. We plan on posting once every week. Every Tuesday, and yeah, just tune in on our next episode. Like, share, subscribe, however you can. Share with your family, your cats, your turtle.
Divulge in whichever way you can.
And if you have any ideas on what book or series or movie you want us to inform you about or to analyze, just leave it in the comments below and like and share. And yeah, so I'm Danny.
And I'm Marla.
And yeah, we'll see you on the next one.